We're going to talk tonight about the stages of Job's grief and suffering. So basically, we're talking about the story of Job, but looking at how he reacted to things, not so much just the story in general. We're not going to talk about Satan's role in it or anything like that, except just to set the stage, just to remember what happened with Job, why he went through grief and suffering. He was the most righteous man on earth, and God pointed him out to Satan and said, "Have you considered Job, my servant, who is always doing what is right and turns away from evil?" And Satan suggested that if God would allow him to hurt Job, if he would stop protecting Job, then Job would turn against God and he would curse God. Well, what God allowed Satan to do, Satan destroyed a lot of what Job had. He took away his servants. He had a lot of servants. They were killed, not just taken, but killed. His 10 children were killed. He had a lot of animals, his riches that were stolen. And it was just a horrible thing. And it all happened in one day. And Job remained faithful regardless. And then later on, Satan said, "Well, that's because I couldn't touch him personally with his health." And so God said, "Fine, you can touch his health, but you cannot kill him." And so Job became miserable. In fact, we'll see that he preferred to have died. He was struck with boils from his head to his feet and just was in absolute misery. But when we talk about his initial reaction to everything with what was happening, we have this initial reaction that's different from the natural human reaction. So Job lost what we could call everything, not really everything. In fact, his most important thing is his relationship with God, which he did not lose, but his approach was commended by God. In Job chapter 1 and verse 20 through 22, it says, "Then Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head. And he fell to the ground and worshipped. And he said, 'Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.' In all this, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong." So that statement is there to tell us that what he says, while it may not be 100% accurate in the sense that Satan was involved and Job didn't know about that part, but saying that the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away is not charging God with wrong. And he said, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." That is not the reaction most of us would have to this type of situation. When everything happens horribly to us in one day and we praise God, we give God glory, even though we believe he's behind it. That was just an amazing reaction from Job. It is not the reaction his wife had. His wife was much more like what we would be tempted to be. She was very clearly angry with God much sooner than Job becomes angry with God, and she advised him to curse God and die in Job 2, verse 7 through 9. This is after Job is personally struck. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, and he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." Now, I'm not entirely sure if she says this just out of anger with God or perhaps a misplaced idea that if he curses God, God will kill him and end his misery. I'm not entirely sure what that meant. She could even be saying curse God and die by killing yourself. That's a way of cursing God and dying, committing suicide. But she might have had the concept that that would end the misery, although it would not in reality. There's a much, much greater misery beyond death for those who curse God. But Job refused to do that. He maintained his wonderful approach to suffering in Job 2, the next verse, verse 10. "But he said to her, 'You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity?' In all this, Job did not sin with his lips." Even when he says that to his wife, which some people would say is is too harsh after what she's been through. She's lost all this that he has lost except for his health. She lost her children, all of that. And yet, even when he says, you speak as one of the foolish women speak, some people say that's too harsh. But we're told he did not sin with his lips. She needed to hear that. He was telling her what she needed to hear here. He's pointing out that you still need to maintain your acceptance of God being good and accepting whatever he has for us. And so this is an amazing reaction. He is known for his patience. And you can see patience involves suffering, being faithful through suffering. This does last for quite a while, but there comes a time when there just seems to be no end in sight, where there is a shift to anger. And perhaps maybe frustration is a better word than anger, but I don't think anger is necessarily a wrong term here. So as time passed without relief, we're seeing that Job is sitting there. He has friends come and they sit in silence for 7 days. But then when he starts speaking, he speaks in frustration or perhaps anger about his specific circumstances and even with what God was doing that he could not understand. And he ends up cursing the day that he was born. In Job 3, verse 3 through 5, he says, "May the day perish on which I was born, and the night in which it was said, a male child is conceived. May that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor the light shine upon it. May darkness and the shadow of death claim it. May a cloud settle on it. May the blackness of the day terrify it." He says, I wish I was never born. This day that I was born on is a horrible day. For me to be going through this torture, I would much rather have never been born. And he says that a number of times and in different ways. But he's in the depths of depression. He's lost hope. He has no rest. He says in Job 3, verse 26, "I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, for trouble comes." And so he's really in depression. He can't sleep. He's only suffering, and he is hopeless. He believes that he will never see good again. His life is just going quickly. In Job 7, verse 6 through 10, "My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle and are spent without hope. Oh, remember that my life is a breath. My eye will never again see good." Now, he's wrong about that. He does see good again, and that's why God did not allow him to die. He thinks that death would be better, but he's wrong. He doesn't know what God has planned for him, but he has this idea that he's going to the grave. His life is quickly going to be over, and he will never again see anything good. His life will just be misery until the end. And so his anger escalates or gets more and more, gets greater and more intense, it seems like, in the way that he words things. But part of that is because he's discussing with his friends, and he's upset with them, but part of that gets directed towards God as well. He's frustrated with how God is treating him, as well as how his friends are treating him, because they're accusing him of sin without any evidence for it. They can't tell him how he's sinned. And it just seems like there is no reason for how God is treating him. And so he says here in Job 7, verses 11 through 21, "What have I done?" He's asking God, why are you doing this? What have I done to deserve it, basically? Why do you set me as your target? And he asks God to leave him alone. He says, when I'm saying even my bed will comfort me, then you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions. I can't even sleep. I have nightmares. Then he says, I loathe my life. I would not live forever. He's asking, how long is this going to go on? And so he says, have I sinned? What have I done to you, O watcher of men? And so he's really just suffering, depressed, and angry, or at least frustrated with God. Why do you not pardon my transgression? You've set me as a target. Why? And so he accuses God of injustice, essentially, because he feels like he's been righteous for nothing. He says in Job 9, verse 29 through 33, "If I am condemned, why then do I labor in vain? If I wash myself with snow water and cleanse my hands with soap, Yet you will plunge me into the pit, and my own clothes will abhor me. He's basically saying, I could make myself completely clean and God would just cover me in filth. I don't have any reason to really be working to be righteous because of how God is treating me. He's treating me as if I am unrighteous. That's not true. God is treating him as righteous, but he doesn't understand it. And so he's upset. He's angry about it. He's frustrated for sure. And he says in Job 10, verse 1 through 7, that my soul loathes my life. I will give free course to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Show me why you contend with me. Does it seem good to you that you should oppress, that you should despise the work of your hands and smile at the counsel of the wicked? He's saying, you've made me. Why would you despise me when you have made me? I'm even doing the things you want to be done. So why would you treat me like this? He then says in Job 10, he asks, is it right? That's what we just looked at. Is it right for God to oppress the work of his own hands? And he's basically challenging how reasonable God is. This is the main thing I want us to look at, is that he keeps his faith in God. Even though he's angry, he's depressed, he's even accusing God a bit of injustice, which he should not do, but he never intends to abandon God completely. Most people would be saying, because God is like this, I don't want anything to do with God. That's how a lot of people react. But his faith is unbreakable, even though he's just covered in misery, in darkness. He says in chapter 13, verse 15 and 16, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Even so, I will defend my own ways before him. He also shall be my salvation, for a hypocrite could not come before him. So he's saying, look, I am not going to be a hypocrite. I'm just honest. I'm telling what I honestly think. And because if I'm a hypocrite, I know I can't come before God, but I know he will be my salvation. I trust him even though he's doing all of this to me. And so the real difference between Job and almost everybody else who has faced any kind of severe thing like this, that as far as their initial reaction or their natural reaction, and I don't know if this is Job's natural reaction, but it's how he reacts, his underlying trust in God prevents his depression from becoming just the complete despair and abandonment of everything that those who do not know God have. It's an anchor that saves him. It keeps him with God. And so he wants to bargain and argue with God. He wants a court date. We see that idea throughout where he wants to vindicate himself and convince God that what God is doing to him is unjust. It's not fair. And so he wants to argue his case with God, filling his mouth with arguments, and he wants to understand what God is going to say in response. He wants to hear God's answer. We're not going to read this, but in Job 23, that's what he's saying. One of the things, just to point out, one of the things that makes his torture worse in some ways is memory of how good things were before. He goes through in chapters 29 and 30 how he used to be respected and honored, but now he's mocked and humiliated. And that contrast makes his pain worse. It makes his suffering even more unbearable. So memory becomes part of his torture. How good things used to be, now it's even worse. And that happens with a lot of people. When we have really good memories but now things are so horrible, we don't even want to remember how good it was before because it makes the contrast so much worse. But God then does talk to Job. He confronts him and he reminds him of who God is. He's the creator, and who Job is. He's the creation or the created. And God challenges Job's attitude with these impossible questions. He says, prepare yourself like a man. I will question you and you shall answer me. And he's talking to him out of a whirlwind. And Job repents. He comes to his senses. He realizes his place. And he says, I repent in dust and ashes. I was speaking without knowledge. I should not have spoken what I did not understand. And so then God restores him and blesses him, gave him twice what he had before, gave him 10 more children, renewed life, filled with purpose, and he was happy and joyful. But I want us to see that the way he handled his anger at his situation, his frustration, was with faith. He never turned against God. He never said, because of all this, I'm giving up on God. He said, even though I want to talk to God, I want to find out from him, this seems unjust, and I'm angry about it, but I trust God. He will save me. I know that. Even in the middle of all of that frustration, that was his mindset, and that's what saved him. And I think that's really important when we go through things like that. Do not give up our faith in God. It turned out well for Job in the end because he maintained his faith, and it will turn out well for us also.